student development. Dr. Moore Jr. will be joining us shortly, and Dr. Moore has pursued and achieved success in academic circles and leadership and community service. And in 1996, he started America and More, which includes comprehensive diversity, privilege, and leadership trainings. And he offers numerous ways that language has been used to create prejudice and antagonism against people of a different race or ethnicity. And I am Renita Robinson. I'm the CEO here at the YWCA Green Bay, where we are dedicated to eliminating racism, promoting, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. We're really excited to be with you all today on the call to talk a little bit about how language is used and to just kind of highlight the fact that it's such a powerful vehicle of communication. Hello, Dr. Moore Jr. And so in this series of Where We Live, we will just talk a little bit about the numerous ways that language has been used to actually create prejudice and discrimination, antagonism against people of different races and ethnicities. And all of us will be in some form of way offering some solutions for ways language can be used to heal. And so thank you all for joining us. And Melissa, if you wouldn't mind, kind of start us off with kind of a definition of, or some information on how language functions.
Yeah. So Renita had asked me to come on and be part of the panel tonight, and I was really honored to be asked. So thank you, Renita. And with my background with neurolinguistic programming, a lot of that is studying language. And so one of the things, as I was preparing for tonight, was just to start off with this sentence of language having the power to shape our reality. And I'll talk about this a little bit and give some background on how that functions, and then the other panelists will be able to speak more to how that impacts them based on their personal experience. So one of the things as I was preparing was looking at the influence of language isn't so much about what we can think about. So it doesn't limit what we can and can't think about, or even what we do or don't think about, but rather it helps to break up our reality into categories and into how we label things and events. So it shapes and gives meaning to our experience and to our perspective. So to explain the science behind language, and this is a well-researched but also controversial topic when you start to get into it, but the language in the brain, to understand it, imagine that there are 2 million bits of information coming at you per second. So some researchers say it's more information than that, but generally, rule of thumb, 2 million is a lot. So if you had 2 million bits of information coming at you per second, we take in that information through our 5 senses, and then we filter that information down to like 126 bits. So 2 million down to 126 bits. And from there, we filter it even further to 7 plus or minus 2, which incidentally is why telephone numbers are typically 9 digits, because that's what we can process at any one time. So think of your brain as a supercomputer. So we take in all of this information, and then our brains have this amazing ability to file what we take in. And we are able to file every thought, feeling, and experience that we've ever had from birth till now. So one of the things that's important when we talk about race is, how do our filters work? So how do we take all that information that's coming in and filter it down? So we typically, for all of us, we tend to filter information based on what we're looking for and what's important to us. So by doing this, we tend to delete, distort, and generalize information based on a lot of different factors. So time, what's happening in the moment, what's happening in the news and in the world around us. We filter information based on our memories, decisions, our past experiences, our values, beliefs, and our attitudes, and ultimately also the language and meaning that we give to define our experiences. So to give an example currently of how powerful language is, I want you just, for those of you that are watching, think about the word privilege. So consider the word privilege for a moment. As you think about that, what comes to mind? Is privilege something that's earned? Is it something that can be taken away? You know, what feelings come up for you as you think about that word? And do you find yourself feeling defensive at all? And if so, just ask yourself why. Without judging what you're feeling, just ask yourself why. I was thinking about that word because until a few months, 2 months ago, probably before George Floyd was murdered, when I was thinking about privilege, it was from a parent perspective in disciplining our kids. Like, you can earn this privilege, or you can have this privilege taken away. And now with what's in the news, what we're taught, the conversations that we're having now, like, I'm filtering that in a much different way, and it has a whole different meaning for me today than it did a couple months ago. Another phrase to think about is law and order. So when you take that in, again, pay attention to your interpretation of that, because there's multiple interpretations. Could be a TV show, right? For some, it brings up thoughts, and it could bring up feelings of punishment and police brutality. For others, it can bring up a sense of safety, protection, comfort. Notice just the parts of that whole experience that you may be deleting, distorting, or generalizing based on your interpretation and reactions. Because we all do it. Like, all of us, to survive, our brains have to delete, distort, and generalize. But we're just missing a lot. There's many things that we're unaware of. So our filters just determine the way words impact us. Words carry just a lot of weight, and they carry power that we may not even understand. And they're deeply rooted in our unconscious and the biases that we hold. And again, much of those unconscious biases are things that we're not aware of unless we have conversations like we're having tonight. So all of us make really simple, basic decisions, thousands of them all the time. And language gets in there to kind of mess with, like, our perceptions of things and decisions that we make without maybe even us realizing the impact on our decisions and on our thinking and on our behavior and on our actions. So now, because of what's happening in the world, in our country, in our community, we have the opportunity to ask ourselves, why do I think the way I do? How could I think differently? So reflect on those questions tonight. So because language is core to our experience of being human, the language we speak profoundly shapes the way we think, the way we see the world, and the way we live our lives. So I want to now just turn to the other panelists and just ask both of you, Andrea and Dr. Eddie Moore, how has language played out in your life, and how has it impacted your reality? And who's going to go here? Like,
I don't want to cut you off, Dr. Moore. So language is so important, and my background is very much in psychology and neuroscience and really thinking about this. So the pieces that you were saying very much resonate with me, and are very much in line with the background that I have academically, and the way that we and the YW Greater Green Bay really talks about implicit bias and how that's a part of our lives, and how so much of the language that is around us really shapes how we see things and how we interpret things, and that sort of constant bombardment of language really shapes our world views. And then also with implicit bias, how we sort of fall back into those defaults when we are stressed or agitated, when we're tired, and we're not able to engage with really our kind of values and higher order thinking in the same way.
For me, I think about language in the way I have to experience it as a Black man at work and as a Black man living a day-to-day life. You know, I think about three kind of pieces in reference to language, you know, just how it lands on a person, how we understand it, come to make sense of it, and, you know, the resources, so to speak, around us to assist us with whatever may be the result of that. I mean, one word in particular I think about is the N word or the nigger word. I mean, how that lands on me in my neighborhood may be different than if it lands on me at work. And all the kinds of things that I've come to understand around that word, who says it, how it lands on me, how I deal with it, may impact, you know, what I need around me in reference to the kind of resources. So, I mean, when you introduce the brain science around that, and also the time we're living in right now, which I think is so critical because the language, particularly around the work of inclusion and diversity, and so many of the issues that we're grappling with right now has changed, has evolved so much. And what I think about for myself is, am I evolving? Am I expanding? Am I growing? Because I think that's really, as Carolyn Dweck talks about, that's really the kind of mindset, that open mindset we need to be in, because it feels like to me, even though we're dealing with some really difficult stuff, that in 2020, people are still in a 1980 mindset around some of these concepts, some of the language. And I'm just, you know, glad I'm here to kind of do some learning myself. But it's a really interesting time and a really important topic, I think, as we look at the time we're in now.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that. And so indeed, it's interesting to just be forced to think critically about this whole language thing. And I think that when we're in a conversation like this, then we think very critically and differently than when we're just hearing things casually and or either letting the language that we're hearing confirm the biases that we have or not. And so recently, actually the same day that George Floyd was murdered, we had a situation that kind of went viral and really kind of threw the issue of how people with privilege use language and power and the violence associated with the way language can be used. And so we thought we would play a clip of a person. It's a quintessential example of how a person with a lot of privilege can weaponize language. And what we see in this clip is that a person kind of has a knowing of the weight and the power of that language. And so we're going to play that right now.
Would you please stop? Sir, I'm asking you to stop.
Please don't come close to me.
Sir, I'm asking you to stop recording me.
Please don't come close to me.
Please take your phone off.
Please don't come close to
And
me.
I'm taking a picture and calling the cops.
Please call the cops. Please call the cops.
I'm going to tell them there's an African-American man threatening my life.
Please tell them whatever you like.
Excuse me? I'm sorry, I'm in the ramble, and there is a man, African American, he has a bicycle helmet. He is recording me and threatening me and my dog. There is an African American man, I am in Central Park. He is recording me and threatening myself and my dog. And my... I'm sorry, I can't hear you either. I'm being threatened by a man in the ramble. Please send the cops immediately. I'm in Central Park in the ramble. I don't know.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So some of us have seen that a few different times, and every time I see it, it's chilling to me for a number of reasons. And so I'd like to hear your reactions, just your gut level reactions, and then we're going to unpack kind of how language went from 0 to 10, the escalation of it, and how just even the intonation of her voice and the way she was changing the words changed the situation and the weight of it. So why don't you all respond to that? Eddie?
I'll start. I think the thing that comes up for me is white fragility is actually an oxymoronic term in this case, that it could be, and luckily not in this case, one of the most deadliest positions that a white woman could be in, pretending to be under attack, fragile, in danger, and possibly causing the death of a Black man. Now, again, fortunately, in this case, that didn't happen, but I always say it this way: when you cry, white woman, I die, Black man. And that's what that clip brings up to me, is there's nothing fragile about this position that this woman presented. And luckily, this brother lived through this experience, but we know that that's just not always the case over history, past, present, and possibly future.
And I want to ask you ladies, do you all think that she knew what she was doing?
Watching it again, like my reaction every single time, Eddie, to your point, I just feel sick to my stomach every time, and like and ashamed. Just a lot of shame that comes up too. I think with how it escalated, that it was intentional. Even if it was unconscious, that she had some inkling of the power that she had and what she was doing.
Mm-hmm. Andrea?
I totally agree with Melissa on this one, that one, it's so gut-wrenching to watch this clip every time. It's just really horrifying to see that kind of behavior. But then also on top of that, and she's clearly in a stressful situation. I have a big dog, and sometimes he doesn't have manners, and I get really embarrassed and flustered when he doesn't behave in public, sure. But to see how, like I was talking about before, when we get flustered, when we get nervous, we really resort back to that sort of default stance that we have. And it's so disheartening and really scary to see that the sort of that default programming that we have as white women and as white people is to go to this place of, I'm going to cry, I'm going to panic. I know that if I am in peril and I play this sort of damsel in distress card with the police department, that they're going to come and and rescue me from this situation. Whether I got myself here or not, I know that I have that kind of power, and that the police are going to protect me in this situation and come to my aid. And whether she thought about it and what the sort of consequences were going to be for the gentleman in this, I don't know. But it's really scary to me to see that, that when we're stressed and when we go back to that kind of base programming, like that's the place that so many of us go. And that it's so easy for us to go to that place, and also really scary to think about what is the messaging and what's the language that we're hearing out in the world that's creating that kind of default programming in us, that's where we go.
Mm-hmm. Renita, I just want to say one other quick point that I think is worth us considering as I watch this and reflect on this and listening to both Melissa and Andrea, is there's also power in these tears, as Andrea mentioned. And that's one of the things, as people are talking about, what do we do? What can I do? I'm saying, hey, if you have the ability to cry and get the popo there in seconds, like you could change the results of something, in seconds with your tears, then let's cry for justice. Like if we have a school board meeting and we need more funding, like bring those tears there, right? If we're trying to do some initiative in reference to the why, fundraising wise, let's use those tears right there, right? Let's think about a way, if we see that there's power in these tears, that we think about not being dangerous, deadly, but being powerful and positive. And that's another thing that I think about in reference to the actual weaponry, that this title is so brilliant, Renita. It's not only a weapon that could cause danger, but possibly, save some lives and empower some lives. And I think that's worth considering as well.
Thank you. And so you talked about tears, you talked about a voice, so all of these being kind of possible weapons that can be used. And so when we're talking about language, we know that it can be used to silence others. We know that it can be used to oppress others. But what do you think about silence being agreement? Because we don't think about how we will encourage people to talk, but we don't often reflect on the fact that when you're not talking, you're actually agreeing. And so we've heard it said that if you're in the presence of saying someone saying something that is racist, that is sexist, that is homophobic, and you do nothing about it, your silence is demonstrating agreement. Would you all respond to that, please?
Yeah, so
I
Renita,
can-
I
oh, go ahead.
definitely,
Go ahead, Andrea.
I definitely agree with you that silence is agreement. And going back to that piece about, the language that's coming into us every day and surrounds us every day. And if we don't actively come out and offer another piece of language and another perspective and really challenge what's coming into us, then we get what we get.
Melissa?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that silence is saying that you're agreeing with it, even to Andrew's point, even if that's not your intention. I've had so many conversations in the last 2 or 3 weeks about this topic, and the fear that I think people have about, gosh, I'm so afraid to speak up and say something. If I say something and it's the wrong thing, what's the backlash going to be? And then the realization, like as I've talked with people, that if they don't speak up, what is the impact on the person that's being spoken about? What's the impact with the work that I do with organizations? What's the impact on your actual organizational culture if you're staying quiet and allowing people to be spoken to or treated in a certain way, and you're afraid for yourself of the repercussions? But then that's, how do you stand up and do the right thing even when it comes at a personal cost to you? And that's, I believe, a lot of people are grappling with that right now. But I'm hearing from many white women that I'm talking to, just I'm afraid to to speak up, but I know that I need to, but I don't know what to say, and how others are going to perceive it, and what if I stick my foot in my mouth and say something stupid or say something unintentionally racist, and how are people going to react to me? So I think that's something out there that people are experiencing too. But I definitely agree with you that silence is being complicit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Renita, all I want to add to that is, I love the Midwest, good people, good hearts. In fact, I think there are more good people here than some of the things we sometimes see in the headlines. But the thing that frustrates me the most is there are a lot of good people that are quiet. And they don't participate all the time, but sometimes they don't say anything. And the thing I often say, especially to young people, is the best friend that hate has is silence. And I think that's really an important lesson for us to learn as we look at, again, as Sister Melissa's saying, people are saying, what do I do? What can I do? Well, here's the time to just say something. I just wanted to also just throw out there, because I didn't get a chance to ask this question of my panelists, but I wanted to know if that behavior from the park, is that learned behavior? Like, do white women get coached to cry, or is that something they just learn over time? Because I think about, again, the title you created around this, Renita, like weapons. Like, usually it takes some skill to operate that, you know what I'm saying, to put that into play. And tears, white women tears, that's a real serious weapon. And I'm wondering if people just look up on how to use it, or is that something you learn at an early age and you just get better as an adult? And I was just reflecting on that as well. But again, the best friend that hate has is silence.
Oh, Andrew, I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I don't know, as I don't remember hearing or learning anything about being the damsel in distress when it comes to race, but I do remember seeing or hearing, or I don't even know how it came up, but as a young female, white female, if you get pulled over for speeding, if you can turn on the sympathy tears and kind of work it a little bit, maybe you're gonna skate by with a warning and not get that citation or that ticket. And I honestly, I think, Dr. Eddy, as you're talking, probably in the last 3 weeks, I've been watching more documentaries and reading a lot, obsessively, my kids would tell me, about just trying to learn as much as I can myself. And I'm certain that there were unconscious messages that we heard growing up, that in school, with friends, with teachers, with different role models, that reinforce that. Because what Amy Cooper, her behavior in the park, I can't remember anyone explicitly saying that would be an okay thing to do, but when you watch some of the documentaries and see the patterns that have occurred over history, it's the same pattern. And that's the part that's really frustrating for me, is that kind of manipulation of power that's continued to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And we have heard Edmund Burke is credited with the comment, what is it? It's the only thing necessary for good men, for triumph of evil, is for good men to do nothing. You guys have heard that. Most of us has heard that. And I'm just going back to the silence thing, and then I want to address the tears, because I had an experience recently where I was in an environment with a predominantly white environment, and I started talking, and before I knew it, I had kind of teared up, and I was kind of like, I'm not really sad. So I was really asking myself, what's really going on? And when I got home and I started to reflect for it, I was like, was I pulling the tear card? Was I pulling the vulnerability card? And I had to ask myself, was I really sad, or what just happened? Because I have seen that. And so whether it's practice or not, and maybe, again, these kind of behaviors that work get grafted into us. So before we know it, we're students of our moms, of our aunties, of people that we love, getting what they need from tears, and then we just use it. And we didn't even know that we were grafting in that way of relating. But I will tell you this, my dad told me one time, the only thing you can get from those tears is a butt whooping. And I learned in my home that those tears were not working. And so it was really interesting to me when I recognized, like I've grafted in some kind of ways of behaving that are really not my own. They didn't come from my family system. So thank you guys for those things. This is really good. I appreciate this. And I just want to bring the audience into some of this with a question and a reflection, just a couple of minutes to reflect and just to get the heat off of kind of the conversation for a minute. So I want you all to think about a time, so the audience and our panelists, please think about a time where you were in the company of someone saying something or doing something that diminished the humanity of another person, and you did nothing. All right, so for the four of us on the visual right here now, how many of you guys could reflect on something fairly quickly? Could you? Yeah, unfortunately, all of us kind of raise our hand. And I do that not to say, oh, you're bad, but to say it's the human condition. Actually, if we have not practiced and exercised the muscle of doing hard stuff that is costly to us, we talk often about we want to empower these people, and we can get money talking about empowering people, but not a lot of money is given for imprivileging people because it costs us something. It is a cost to us, sometimes financial, sometimes it's socio-emotional, but it is a cost to us to give away some of the privilege that we have. And we need to think, I think, more about that. We have to think more about imprivileging people for the shifts that need to happen for there to actually be equity, for there to be inclusivity, for there to be just the kind of life that most Americans say, yep, I want this for my family at least, for that to be available to all Americans. So we have a few questions that have come in, and so I want to follow up with the first one about how do you feel about the reality that if you want to be a part of the change that we say we want to have happen, that it's going to cost you some of your privilege. How do you all feel about that? First of all, from the panelists.
Yeah, so I think that this is a really interesting question. And something that does need to really be addressed is this idea of, so we've learned this privilege, we've learned that we have these privileges, like Melissa said, and Dr. Moore asked, I don't remember a time when my mom sat me down and told me, like, if you just cry, you'll get out of anything. But it's certainly something that I have learned over the course of my lifetime, that this is a way that white girls and white women get out of things. But now is really an important time that we can be able to recognize that, to be able to recognize that this is racist behavior. And how do we take that knowledge then, once we recognize that that's what we're doing, and being able to learn and do better in the future? And part of that is really like harnessing what is coming into our lives. And like Melissa talks about neuro-linguistic programming, what is that language that's coming into our lives that's shaping this? How do we change that so that our default and where we're going back to isn't a place where we're using these privileges and weaponizing our privileges in racist or other kinds of oppressive ways?
Quickly, Renita, I'm ready to share. In fact, part of my philosophy is accumulate as much power and privilege as possible so that I can be more equitable and proactive in distributing and impacting structures and systems that I can have an influence on to keep trying to balancing the scale. I don't know if I'll see it in my lifetime, but simultaneously, yes, I'm willing to give it up and also keep working to somewhat gather gains so that I can better distribute and balance the scale, so to speak.
Excellent, thank you. Melissa?
Yeah, so so when it comes to privilege, I am, without making any excuses, I honestly did not think about white female privilege until very recently. And you guys can, if there's haters out there that are upset, I didn't know. And so, but now I'm one of those where my eyes have been opened, and so I'm actively pursuing as much knowledge as I can and wanting to partner with people to change things, recognizing that I am fortunate. I'm in a position where I can hopefully be a part of some sort of change, whether it's in my organization or with business owners or leaders that I work with, or just in my community and with neighbors, or even conversations I just had with my hairdresser on Saturday about, her raising her son who has a Black father, and she's white, and she's dealing with prejudice in her own family. But one of the things that very quickly came to mind for me early on when I was grappling with this notion of privilege, and when people were talking about Black Lives Matter, all lives matter, I had said all lives matter is not even true, because when we look at education, for example, in our communities and how things are structured, not all kids' lives matter with where resources go to our communities, and there are certain people that are given a leg up, and that's just I don't have any answers except for just to acknowledge that that now I'm aware, and I'm becoming more aware, and I want to be a part of just giving everybody a fair shot, hopefully. Because it hasn't a lot of things that have happened have just not been right. So
thank you for that. And so you brought up one of the next questions, and centering it back on the weaponization of language. There is a huge rift whenever you say all Black Lives Matter, right? The country is really split about language, the language of who matters. And so could you all please speak a little bit about what's all the hubbub? What's up with that? What is the big deal between Black Lives Matter, that statement, and the statement of all lives matter?
I don't get it. Of course, all lives matter, but right now, especially when you look back at history of the last 400 years, clearly we have not done a good job of making Black Lives Matter, and we need to make that a focus. So I don't understand why there's a need to say all lives matter. I honestly don't get it. If anyone has any comments on if they understand it, but I don't.
Yeah, well, I think you referenced it already, Melissa. I mean, the research, the statistics, the facts of the matter are right there in our plain sight. Historically, present day, and possibly into the future, that if you look at the way Black people specifically, but people of color in general, were treated by this great nation, I mean, there's just some real clear evidence that shows all lives did not matter. That only certain groups, from the legislation to the organizations to the structures, the systems, I mean, the message is clear. And I think, to me, Black Lives Matter is a gut check, a checkup for us as a nation to really focus in on some of the populations of our country that have been treated the most, in the most horrific way since they've arrived here. And that if we're going to truly create, I like all lives matters as a goal. If we're going to truly create and get there, we have got to make sure that Black lives matter. And so that's, to me, the way that I see it, the way I look at it. And when people are arguing about all lives matters versus Black Lives Matter, for me, Sister Renita, I'm just saying, let's just look at the facts. And I'd like to be there. And if you can show me some proof where that's true, then I'm willing to make some adjustments. But right now, I feel like I'm saying it loud, Black Lives Matter. We have got to spend some energy there. And I think that's going to assist us in reaching our goal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Andrea, did you have something?
Yeah, so I think that there's some really interesting literature and science out there about why, as Americans, we're really attracted to this idea of all lives matter. But I think that it's really important for us to be able to recognize kind of how to respond to that and how to make sure that we're really engaging with our values as people instead of just like kind of what we've been fed in the society that we live in and those kinds of things. So being able to really figure out why it is that Black Lives Matter is the important statement, and then being able to figure out how to confront and address that with the people in our lives. One of my favorite sort of statements lately has been, all lives won't matter until Black lives matter. So let's focus on that piece of it. Let's think about the part of our community that is really struggling and has had horrific and horrible experiences in this country for the last 400 years, and deal with it instead of just ignoring it and shoving it under the rug and, you know, not looking at it again until we move out of our apartment and say, oh, you know, like I probably shouldn't have put that like rotten, toxic stuff under that rug because it's still there. And we really have to be able to address it to be able to deal with it.
Yeah. So this is probably best for the resources piece, but I just want to say this right now so that it's close to the conversation about the difference between saying Black Lives Matter and all lives matter. But we are grounding a lot of our diversity in the intercultural development inventory, and the denial is the first kind of rung on this inventory. And basically, when people are in denial, they're not interested in hearing the facts and the truth about something. So if a person that has been wounded by racism says Black Lives Matter, they're saying that because the reality is that they haven't. And it isn't taking anything away from the lives that have mattered and that there is evidence for mattering, right? And so the huge kind of backlash when a person says Black Lives Matter is because people don't want to face the reality that this country has behaved so poorly towards people who are Black, people who are brown, people who are yellow, people who are red. And it is necessary for us to come to a moment of reckoning and say the truth about what has been the history of race relations, in particular towards people who are super visible. Because when you have the conversation of language and something like Blacks, light-skinned or dark-skinned, Dr. Moore and I could probably go on a little tangent talking about, like, even amongst African American, how language has made people who are my complexion feel less than people who are a lighter complexion. You know, and I'm gonna just hijack this for a second, if you all don't mind. I want to hijack this conversation and tell you just about one incident that I had since I've been here at the YWCA. And we had a situation where we had a person that was responding to a decision that I had made about a policy. It was a volunteer in our ranks, and they were responding to a situation. And what they said was, well, Renita always brings up that Black stuff. And an African-American on our staff who was very fair-skinned said, what? Because she hadn't heard me bring up a bunch of Black stuff, because I actually don't bring up a bunch of Black stuff. And the person told the person, well, I'm actually very offended by that because I'm Black. And the woman said, oh, I'm not talking about your kind of Black. I'm talking about that dark kind of Black like Renita. So now I'm the CEO of this organization. And that's what someone who's volunteering because they believe in eliminating racism and empowering women and promoting peace and justice and freedom and dignity for all. That's what they think about me. When they see me, even though I've never said a word to them about race, about racism, about anything similar to what she had convinced herself that I always say, that's really what's going on in the weaponization of language. And a person that's an intuitive like me feels that. And because I feel that sometimes when I go into environments that are full of white people, I don't present as well as I would present if I feel safe. And so those are some realities about the weaponization of language that Black people carry inside of them. And you all don't know it because some of us actually still get by pretty well, right? You know, so I appreciate it when Dr. Moore is always talking about basically like this double consciousness that he has to exist in. Well, I have to exist in the same, well, actually triple consciousness. I have to exist in the consciousness of being a Black person, of being a woman person, and then of being a person that basically has to prove myself every time I open up my mouth. And language, you all, is a way that we can even out the playing field, or at least give support to some of the people who have carried around the luggage of that all their entire life.
Yeah.
Just a gut level reaction to that.
Yeah, I just want to add one quick point about Black Lives Matter, which I think is connected to that in the language, because I feel like as I hear more white people say it and in support, it's still a kind of deficit model, a savior model. Like, it's not Black Lives Matter to help those down and out people, poor people. I mean, actually, if you look at the resilience, the excellence, the genius, the accomplishment of Black people based on what this nation has done to them over time, it's not a kind of handout that we're looking at, right? It's an affirmation. Like, Black Lives Matter is a statement of affirmation, not a statement of rescue. That is how I look at it. And I think it's really important for folks, as we're gaining new allies and actually seeing people say Black Lives Matter who've never said Black Lives Matter, or wearing t-shirts or bumper stickers, whatever, to remember that it's not this savior framework for me that I'm coming from when I'm talking about Black Lives Matter. Like, this is Black excellence, Black genius you're dealing with that has never been respected, honored, and acknowledged here in this nation. And now is the time. Black Lives Matter. And I think it's really important from the language of that we be an affirming kind of statement as opposed to a deficit or savior kind of statement.
Mm-hmm. 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 Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, so we've said a lot, you all, and we've opened up a bunch of cans of worms, but we want to just include some of the community questions in there. And so thank you for hanging in there. And so first of all, one of the questions that we received says, I've always had a problem with the phrase, it's Black or white. Meaning is good or bad, and I refuse to use the term, but only occasionally will challenge another person for saying it. What's your opinion and your insight, panel?
I think you should call on us for our answers. I'll just say quickly, I agree. I think we need to do a language assessment evaluation, that if we're using these kinds of words to mean good, to mean evil, to mean better, that we readjust that, because I think there's been some real research and some intentionality with assigning some of these words. And I mean, need my linguistic scholar to confirm some of this, but in my minimal research, that you do have some applications to dark to mean bad, and light or white to mean better. And I think that if we can do that all in our circle of power, where we live in the theme of this series, I think that's a great start.
Okay.
Renita, I had seen that question, you had shared it earlier, and so I brought it up with my team today, and as we were talking, like everyone's like, I never thought about it in that context before. That was the reaction. There's a leadership assessment tool that we've used with organizations, and one of the profiles talks about Black and white thinking. So this, I was like, we don't have to say Black and white. There's so many, what does that really mean? What are we trying to acknowledge? And, Dr. Eddy, to your point, does that connotate bad and good? And I honestly, until today, like there's so many common phrases that are said that are just second nature. So when we talk about language and the weaponization of language, I do agree with you that I think doing an inventory of like what are common phrases that we use in our vocabulary every single day that we don't understand the context, the history, the meaning, the racism behind some of the phrases and words that we use. I mean, there's many things that probably all of us say on a daily basis that we're not aware of. And I appreciate people like Renita that that give me feedback if I say something, she's like, oh, that means this in this context. Because I'm learning, and I feel like almost like deconstructing our language to build it back up is where I think we need to go.
Anybody else? Okay, so our next question, so how does a damaged, quote, adult perception find a way to implement powerful, positive change for the generations who come after them? And I think we started answering that already, but would you all like to extend an answer to that?
I think that this is such an insightful question in really acknowledging how we are passing on this kind of trauma and to future generations, and to be able to think about that. So falling back to the last question, and Dr. Eddie Moore, you were talking about this, Renita, you brought this up, being able to really take an inventory of what is the language that we're using around our kids and other kids around us, so that we're not continuing to perpetuate these really racist and otherwise oppressive stereotypes with our kids. And then also really modeling to our kids being self-aware and taking back control over that sort of implicit bias that we have. So being able to acknowledge, okay, so what Amy Cooper did, that was racist and that was bad, and we need to work to make sure that we're not doing that in our lives. And being able to model that kind of behavior where you're able to say, I'm not just the base programming that comes out of the society that we live in, but my values and my beliefs and who I am as a person is more than that. And these are the kinds of things that I value. I value equality. I value equity. I value peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. And how do we model that and make sure that we're really sharing that piece with our kids too?
Thank you. Anybody else?
I'll just say quickly, just someone who's always got a saying for everything. I always say this: kids don't pay attention to what you say, kids watch what you do. And I like what Andrea is saying in reference to young people. I just think that's so important. Also, the acknowledgement, I think it's worth improving and getting better by starting with what's wrong, something's wrong, as opposed to denial and defensiveness. I think that's a real sign of growth. And last thing I'll say is, I think strategy. I mean, this is a bit controversial, but I'm saying, hey, if white women tears work, then let's use them in a good way. Is there a way we could cry for justice as a way to think about these next 25 years of strategy? Because it seems like hate, white supremacy, white supremacists, they're evolving, they're strategizing, they're presenting new ideas, new ways of participating in society and causing these divisions and these ugly kinds of results. And I think those of us who are on the side of justice, we should be revitalizing, re-energizing, evolving as well. So I just want to put that back on the table and not let that go lightly. If those tiers work, yes, let's use them for justice.
Yeah, I'm just mindful of the time. We have about 5 minutes left, and I want to offer some tools, but then I also want to lead with some practice of things that people can say when knowing when they're in that situation, kind of in the deer in the headlights moment, and someone says something that is oppressing someone else. What can they say in response? So I kind of wrote some things down, and you guys can chime in if there are other things. So when someone says something that's clearly not true and it is oppressive, they can say, you can say, if you're in the earshot of it, you can say, I don't believe that about those people. If someone says something that really is painfully racist, you can say, oh, it's hurtful to hear me, for me to hear you say that. If someone says something that you know causes another person to be at risk, you can say out loud, when you talk like that, it endangers people I care about, right? And so we want to make sure that we're keeping track of how some of the conversations are landing. So please write us at our administrator email, or me at my email, or find the emails for the folks that we have on our panel and write them and tell us the things that really captivated you or felt like you wanted to work on from being a part of this conversation. But I want to just let you know that we have made provision for some other things. And so we have a couple more town hall sessions like this scheduled already. The next one is July 15th. It's called Problem or Solution: The Role of Systems and Professionals in Addressing Racism. The next one is July 25th, and it is called Connecting Green Bay: Resources to End Racism. And so we'll be talking a lot about the upcoming events and other resources that are available. And we have had an addition, so it's not necessarily under the umbrella of where we live, but it's called No Wrong Thing. So Melissa and I will be teaming up in a lunchtime conversation, and we'll be inviting folks that just don't know what to say and they're afraid to say the wrong thing to call in and talk with us about it really being no wrong thing when you're trying to learn things that you just don't know. Dr. Moore, would you like to share a little bit about some things happening at the Privilege Institute?
Yeah, we are really right now under a reconstruction of our website and some other goodies. So I'm going to ask folks to stand by, stay tuned. But we're going to roll out a brand new website with some great options and opportunities locally as well as regionally. So stay tuned. I want to also just say quickly, Renita, ouch is a term that I often use sometimes when somebody says something, just to say, I'll get back to you to let you know what I meant by that, but that hurt a little bit. And lastly, don't be afraid to call a racist. Sometimes, it's okay to say that was some white supremacist stuff. That was some racist stuff. And I'm all for siding on relationships, but I do think we can't let the racists, the white supremacists, off the hook during this time. That if we got to call it, let's call it. But I'm with you. Let's try to build relationships first. But sometimes there are some pancakes you'll never flip over. And I think it's important to call them out. So that's what I'll say. And thank you for that opportunity to talk about TPI and give a little minute last second contribution.
Okay, Melissa or Andrea, do you all have anything to add about things that are available in your spheres of influence?
Andrea, do you want to go?
Well, so my sphere of influence is YWCA. So a lot of the pieces that Renita's talking about. We also do IDI programming. So if you're interested in taking that assessment and really starting to learn and unpack about your own intercultural development, give us a holler, and we'd be really happy to do that with both groups and individual people. And another thing that I just really have to echo this is, a lot of these pieces that Renita and Eddie are sharing with us, like, they're really uncomfortable for a lot of us to say, and it really would be helpful, and I would encourage you to sort of work through this to look at yourself in the mirror and say, that's racist and I don't appreciate it, and do it over and over again until your mouth is comfortable saying that sentence.
Mm.
Wow, thank you.
That's great. Yeah. At our organization, we work with teams and individuals to help break down barriers within teams and break down silos. And so if you have that within your organization, but we are not experts at diversity and inclusion. And so, but everything that's the discussion tonight, and everything that's been happening in the last several weeks now, we are committed to partnering with folks like Renita and with Eddie to look at how do we take this, because this whole topic, when you talk about community culture, organizational culture, it just brings a whole depth of meaning to what does that really mean. And there's many times in organizations where Eddie, you talked about this, the Midwest nice, we get afraid to have conflict about like stuff that's much smaller than race, and then you take race into the equation, it can be even more uncomfortable. But I'm encouraging everybody of like examining your integrity and your values, and just to think about what's the right thing to do, and if speaking up is the right thing to do, what's going to be the consequence of that, like if you're following your values.
All right.
So
thank you. Well, thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you for those of you that dialed in. We encourage you to keep visiting our website at the YWCA is www.ywcagreenbay.org. Please visit us often, and thank you so much. See you next time.